Good evening, everybody. Go ahead and get started. My name is Michelle Bedard. I will be giving the presentation for tonight's webinar. I want to start by letting you know that this presentation is being translated in Spanish by my colleague, Teresa Schoding. If you wish to hear the presentation in Spanish, you may select the interpretation button in the webinar screen.
Esta presentación puede ser traducida en español por Teresa Schoding. Puede hacer clic el botón de interpretación si desea escuchar la presentación en español. Gracias.
And also participating in tonight's webinar is Jessica Grant, the Supervising Transportation Planner, and Derek Bailey, the City Traffic Engineer. And they will both be available for questions at the end of the presentation. So again, good evening. The purpose of tonight's presentation is to discuss the Milpas Street Crosswalk Safety and Sidewalk Widening Project. So we'll go through a little bit of the background of where we started and how we got to where we are today, review some of the concept plans, go over the project schedule, discuss some anticipated project issues that will need to be resolved prior to the design being completed, and then let you know how to stay involved. And again, I just wanted to share questions and feedback will be available at the end of the presentation. So again, before we get into the current project, we want to provide a background for those who didn't participate in the planning effort back in 2019 and 2020. The programs began with a major maintenance effort, which was planned for Milpas Street. Due to the importance of Milpas Street, we wanted to identify other potential community desired changes to Milpas Street, and at the same time, staff performed a Vision Zero analysis to identify safety improvements. So after we did the initial outreach efforts, we returned with the proposed approaches that received community support at the approach workshop, focused on pedestrian safety enhancements, including safer crossings, enhanced street lighting at intersection, and tree management and sidewalk widening. The community supported items moved forward to the Transportation Circulation Committee and then to City Council. And in April 2020, City Council directed staff to seek funding for the project. Okay, so next slide. This is the original concept design, the project that involved full street improvements, including widened sidewalks, parking pockets, and tree replacements over time. So for the original concept design, we did not receive grant funding for a project of this size and scope. We had to seek grant funding from the state's Active Transportation Program. This is an extremely competitive program, and while we have been awarded funding for past projects, unfortunately, we did not score well on this application. So after meetings with the state, we learned that the project was not transformative enough with multimodal transportation improvements. We were advised to rescope the project to a medium-sized project and focus on intersection safety, pedestrian comfort, and bus stops. And in 2023, we received $7.9 million in grant funding for the rescoped project, with $2 million in city matching monies for separate maintenance and repair funds. So the grant funded project involves intersection safety, minor sidewalk widening, intersection lighting, and improved pedestrian flashers at Ortega and Yananali streets. And then the maintenance project involves repaving in mid-block sidewalk repairs, adding highly visible ladder-style crosswalks, doing better quality pavement markings, and adding ADA accessible improvements. So for safer crossings, when we think of a pedestrian safety, this is an example of a highly visible crosswalk. This project improvements will include ADA accessible features such as accessible push buttons and access ramps, curb extensions to limit pedestrian exposure in the roadway. So the image on the left is an image of a highly visible ladder style crosswalk. The image in the bottom middle is an example of a pedestrian flasher, and then the image on the far right shows the installation of the rapid flashing beacon at the Yananali and Milpas Street intersection. And for safer lighting, we're going to be adding additional street lighting at all intersections. The image on the left is an example of the new street lighting that would be added. The image on the top middle is an example of the existing streetlights designated in the orange circles. The image on the middle bottom is the example of the intersection with the additional 2 streetlights. And then the image on the right is an image of the existing density and proposed new streetlights in the intersections, with the new lights designated in yellow. So the project focus includes enhancements and accessibility improvements to bus stops to provide a wider and more comfortable experience. That includes ADA accessible improvements, wider sidewalks to enhance a more comfortable waiting area. Next, we will go through each of the project intersections. The project begins at the intersection of the North Milpas and Canon Perdido Streets, just a couple blocks before the Santa Barbara High School. And at this intersection, the focus is to widen the sidewalk at the southwest corner between approximately the aggressive soccer retail shop on this corner here, if you can see my mouse, at the corner of Canon Perdido and Milpas here, and the Taco Bell approximately here. So in this intersection, you'll see The blue line here is the existing curb line, and then this is the area of added widened sidewalks. And you'll see there's a bus stop in this location, and that would be adding additional sidewalks to enhance that bus stop experience. In this image, you'll also see that each of the intersections will include new ladder style crosswalks. And then again, you'll see the addition of 2 streetlights at both of these corners. At the De La Guerra intersection, at Milpas and De La Guerra intersection, at the let's see, the bottom right here is at Milpas Motors, and across the street is the restaurant, The Shop. The project scope includes curb extensions and dual directional ramps at each corner of the intersection. Again, you'll notice that the existing blue line is the existing curb line, and then the orange is the area of widened sidewalks at the corners. The project will also include new ADA push buttons, new street lighting, new traffic signal poles for push button mounting, and add buffers to existing bike lanes, potential to add bike parking within the curb extensions, and again, the new ladder crosswalks with leading pedestrian intervals. Moving on to the intersection in Milpas and Ortega Streets, the Capital Hardware site, you will see the existing crosswalk median with here on the north end of the intersection with the rapid flashing beacons in the north side of the intersection. For this intersection, we will also be adding a new median at the south end of the intersection with pedestrian flashers as well. And the project also includes curb extensions, additions of 4 new street lights, and additions of buffers to existing bike lanes. So again, new street lights at these 2 corners, and the added median in the center at the south side of the intersection. At the Milpas and Coda Street intersections, this is Los Agaves, and again, we're just a few blocks from the Santa Barbara Junior High School. The project scope includes new curb extensions at each of the corners with dual directional ramps. Again, new additional streetlights, new ladder style crosswalks with leading pedestrian intervals, and additions of bike parking in the curb extensions. In this intersection, you'll also notice that the large green circles indicate locations for potential new tree well planting locations. Also in this intersection, we are studying adding a left turn arrow for westbound Coda during the AM peak hours, and studying how to maximize safety for the westbound bike lane, potentially protected intersection on the northeast corner. At the Haley and Milpas intersections, the building footprints on the south side of the intersection prohibit really any changes. So at this intersection, the focus will be at the north end of on the north side of the intersection, where we'll do curb extensions, again, some new lighting. Each corner will get new pedestrian style, ladder style crosswalks with leading pedestrian intervals, and the opportunity for additional trees with some opportunity for bike parking. At Milpas and Gutierrez Street, similar to the Milpas and De La Guerra Street intersection, This intersection of the 7-Eleven and CVS includes curb extensions and dual directional ramps at each corner of the intersection. And again, you'll see the blue line indicates the existing curb line, with the orange being the additional area of sidewalk. Again, 4 new streetlights at this intersection, opportunities for additional new tree plantings and bike parking. In this intersection, we are also studying relocating the southbound bus stop from the north side of the intersection to the south side of the intersection to improve safety. At the intersection of Milpas and Montecito Streets intersection, the project will include, again, new curb extensions with dual directional ramps at each corner, addition of 4 street lights, potential for bike parking, new ladder style crosswalks with the lighting and leading pedestrian intervals. At the Milpas and Unanali Street intersections, this is the donut shop on this north end corner. We'll be adding, again, curb extensions at each of the corners. At this north end of the corner, there's an existing rapid flashing beacon. It's going to be converted to a mast arm mounted rapid flashing beacon to improve visibility. And then additional street lights, the ladder style crosswalks with leading pedestrian intervals, and addition for potential new trees and bike parking. At the intersection of Milpas and Mason Street, the project will include, again, each corner curb extensions, new street lighting, bike parking, and potential for new trees. And additional ladder style crosswalks with the leading pedestrian intervals. At Milpas and 500 Street, again, the focus of this project will be the north end of the intersection with 2 new curb extensions, bike parking, new potential trees, and the pedestrian crosswalks, ladder style crosswalks with the leading pedestrian intervals. So in the original outreach meetings, expressed interest to improve crossings within the Milpas roundabout. This is a Caltrans operated intersection. However, we are studying the feasibility to add rapid flashing beacons in the grant application. So just to briefly discuss the project schedule, for the grant application, this is an estimated timeline with the next steps beginning with seeking design consultants and moving forward with design plans anticipated in 2023 to 2025. With potential estimate to have construction begin in spring of 2027 to fall of 2028. There is a potential to expedite this design phase, but that will depend upon how quickly we can work on the issues with the community and the technical experts. As mentioned earlier in the presentation, one of the issues for study is to discuss the existing ficus trees on Milpas Street, which unfortunately are too large for the available space and causing ongoing maintenance issues. We are working with the city arborist and technical consultants for tree analysis and potential for accessibility improvements. We anticipate some tree removal and replacement with different tree canopy species over time. Other issues involve sidewalks. As you may have noticed, September, we began some maintenance repairs. Sidewalks is another study item. Major sidewalk repairs will occur between the intersections. Staff is working with accessibility specialists to determine accessibility improvements. As mentioned earlier in the funding, this part of the project is funded by the city matched monies. And so just to conclude the presentation, really the next steps, how to stay involved. We would love for you to attend community meetings, attend city committee and board meetings, and attend city council meetings as we move forward in this project. And at this time, we will now open it for questions and feedback. And we'll invite Jessica Grant, City's Supervising Transportation Planner, and Derek Bailey, City Traffic Engineer, to join us.
Yes, thank you, Michelle, and good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. Go ahead, if you have any questions, go ahead and either you can type them into the Q&A button below, or you can raise your hand and we can unmute you. Let's go ahead with we have a couple of written questions so far. The first question is, would this project also include bike lanes? There are existing bike lanes from Canon Perdido to Coda. The change with this project with some of the restriping is we'll be able to add in a buffer to those existing bike lanes. But there's also restarting construction soon is the Eastside Community Paseos project that puts an all-age facility on Alisos Street. We anticipate that to be the primary street for cyclists, but those that are more experienced cyclists, again, will be able to enjoy the benefit of the buffered bike lanes. But as we get closer to the freeway, we still need to have the 2 vehicular travel lanes. And so in those sections, the vehicular lane and biking is still shared.
Hey,
Derek,
Jessica?
is there anything else that you wanted to add?
Yeah, if we could just jump back to the community meetings we had a few years ago, and we asked that question, kind of get the community's temperature for either extending the bike lanes down the street towards the freeway, or maybe the bike lanes are too long and we should be the end of the bike lane should be up at Ortega or so. The feedback we got is that it's kind of in the right place right now. Any further south, like towards Haley, could cause more congestion. Any further north, and people have kind of gotten used to it the way it is and like it. So it's the input we got is just leave it alone. Don't mess with the end of the bike lanes.
Yes, thank you, Derek. This next question is, rapid flashing beacons at the roundabout crossings would be wonderful if possible. Can you describe what lead pedestrian intervals are?
The pedestrian intervals are not sure I understand the
question.
question.
That was so in addition to the rapid flashing beacon, so so each of the traffic, the signal
the
lines,
leading pedestrian intervals.
Leading pedestrian intervals.
Oh,
so
okay.
At the existing signalized intersections, that would be changed to have lead pedestrian intervals. And if you could explain for those that are on the webinar right now what that means.
Yes, great question. So we have a handful of these around the city right now, but they're not very widely deployed. What it is the walk light comes up a few seconds before the green light comes up for the adjacent movement, and it gives pedestrians a chance to step out into the crosswalk, kind of establish right of way, become more visible before drivers can kind of zoom around the corner and potentially cut them off. We've had really good safety results in the other ones we've deployed around the city. Caltrans is likely going to be installing them quite widely across the state at all the intersections they operate. So it's becoming a more widely accepted safety practice. Probably the closest one to Milpas Street is Gutierrez and State Street. So if you're westbound on Gutierrez going towards downtown, when you get to State Street, you'll notice the walk light comes on a few seconds early and then the green light for traffic. So that's a leading pedestrian interval.
Thank you, Derek. Michelle, for this next question, can you get to the intersection of Milpas and Canon Perdido? Great. So the question is, I use the right turn lane at Canon Perdido and find it too constricting and always hit the curve, especially where there is a vehicle in the other lane. Are you planning to make it even narrower?
No, we're not planning to touch the corner itself. Just the widened sidewalk would be immediately south of that corner, but we can definitely reevaluate the radius of that corner and make sure that it's appropriate.
Great. Let's see. Is there any other questions that we've answered so far? The three. Oh, it looks like there is one person with a raised hand. Let me go ahead and unmute you. Sorry, Mr. Aldana. I will just trying to figure out the unmute. Attendees, mute. Oh, there we go. Mr. Aldana, I believe you're unmuted. Go ahead and see if we could hear you. No, looks like I'm having a little difficulty. There we go. Mr. Aldana, it looks like it looks like you're unmuted on our end. But we're not hearing you. Michelle, do you think, I just want to make sure maybe, if I'm not having, for some reason, the ability to unmute, it looks like it's unmuted on my end.
Oh, yeah, it looks like he's unmuted. In the interim, while he works, we work on this, we do have a couple more questions in the Q&A, and Mr. Sebastian Aldana, if you want to type your question, or we can come back to you again and try your audio in a few minutes.
Okay. All right, let's go on to the next question. How will this work be staged with regard to school time transit and the development at 7-Eleven North Milpas? And okay, that's a good question. So we don't have a start date yet for the 7-Eleven North Milpas. That's a private development that involves several residential units and mixed and some commercial as well. That's right at the corner of Milpas and Ortega. That is something that will be coordinated accordingly once we have a better idea of their construction timeframe. As part of their project, they were required to do right-of-way improvements with their development. So what we're proposing, the two would not conflict. And then as far as for transit, again, yeah, we work with the schools. This is yes, along some safe routes to school for the junior high and high school, and yeah, we meet with the school for coordination as well as MTD as well. All right, the next question is how many bike parking spaces will be at all of these locations on Milpas Street? Another great question. We don't have a final number yet. We do have basically the curb extensions would allow opportunities in addition to bus stop amenities to also provide for bike parking. That's something that we have heard from the residents to have more bike parking availability, but we don't have a number just yet. All right. The next question is, I'm very concerned about tree removal, and the ficus trees do provide welcome shade. I appreciate that they are large space, but they are also on Carrillo Street. Any trees put in would likely be very small and the street would be very ugly. What replacement trees are you considering, and which ficus trees specifically are you thinking of removing? That is that. So as far as for the tree removal, that is something once this project will have consultants helping us with the design and the technical experts with a consultant arborist, and then alongside with the city arborist doing the technical reviews as well as an accessibility specialist. So I do not have, we don't have a number yet, but that's something that we will return to the community once the experts have had a chance to review the project. Again, yes, what's nice about the ficus trees are that they're canopy trees, and that's something if for the new tree plantings to also be a canopy tree yet. The species has not been decided, but it's very important to the walking environment to have shade. We agree. All right, next question. This question was just, it seems you need to reevaluate the right turn turning radii on all the intersections along Milpas, especially where new lights and trees are planned. Derek, do you want to talk about just in general when we're in engineering design about turning radii and sort of what we best practices and what we work on?
Yeah, it's a balancing act. We don't have final design yet. What's shown on these sketches are just sketches. There's nothing final about them. What considerations that go into the final design is the types of vehicles that typically make the turns. So if there's like Marburg, for example, comes out of the Yananali Street as their heading towards the freeway with very large vehicles. So that's a location that a larger radius might be appropriate. It also depends on the starting location of the turn. So where there's a separate right turn lane, like shown on this image at Cannon Perdido, where the drivers are hugging the curve or the curb, a larger radius might be appropriate there. If they're starting from the middle of the street, there's usually a little bit more room on the corner. So what types of vehicles, their starting location, and then it's a balancing act, because the larger you make the radius, the faster the drivers can take those turns, and generally the more collision prone the intersection is in terms of safety for pedestrians. So it's a balancing act, finding that sweet spot. We're not to that part of the design yet. We're just very early on, but that's a very good comment, and that will be a consideration.
Great. There was a question, why are you not concentrating bike parking in front of all the liquor stores on Milpas Street, as many of their customers ride their bikes there? So again, we're just with anywhere where we're widening the sidewalk at the intersections, we are looking to provide bike parking in those locations. But yeah, we could take a closer look at that. This question, will the curb extensions mean less street parking available in the area?
It depends on the exact location. Generally, we're going to try to keep the curb extensions within the red curb areas that are at the corners. But it depends on drainage. It depends on whether or not there are going to be tree removals and we need to replace a tree within the curb extension. In that case, we might want a little bit longer curb extension so the trees have a larger future tree well. There's a lot of considerations, and again, these are really preliminary sketches that we have right now, so we don't have exact numbers, but generally we're going to try to keep it within the red curbed area.
Great. Next question. It was a comment about there was approximately 25 years ago, there was extensive plans for Milpas, and there was a presentation at the East Side Library of the concepts. What happened to those plans? Any chance of resuscitating some of the ideas and designs? The drawings that I think I'm aware of, feel free to chime in, Derek, but there's the Milpas guidelines, street guidelines that were developed right around that time frame. And yeah, was there anything else, Derek, that you could think of around that time?
Well, that predates
Yeah.
just about everybody that's here now.
Right.
I do remember one of our former city engineers telling me about a project on Milpas, and they had a really hard time getting a community consensus on that project. And so the outcome of that project was the pedestrian sidewalk lighting that's on the street as you see it today. That's those bell-shaped lights that hang over the sidewalk and not over the street. That's my understanding of the project anyway, but yeah, other than that, it's as Jessica mentioned, the Milpas Street guidelines.
All right, next question. The intersection of Milpas and Haley is very collision prone, and I'd like to know what the city plans to do about that intersection. Thank you, Michelle, for going back to this intersection. Derek, did you want to, well, we can mention this, and did you want to say what we were looking at also analyzing once we have the consultant on board for the design?
Yeah, so the shape of the intersection will change slightly with the curb extensions on the north side of the intersection. That's going to have a couple really positive effects for the intersection. one, what it does is it reduces the pedestrian crossing distance from the east side to the west side or vice versa. That's good for a few reasons. It reduces what we call pedestrian exposure. So the pedestrians are in the street for a shorter duration. But it also reduces the flashing don't walk time. And that gives us more flexibility with our traffic signal timing. So it's also good for efficiency. The other thing moving those corners out does is it allows us to move our traffic signals a little bit closer into the center of the road. So if you can think of what a driver views it, the traffic signal indications, the red, yellow, and green, are a little bit closer to the center of their field of view. And that improves traffic signal compliance as well. The thing that Jessica mentioned is we are studying I guess it would be the southwest corner. That's so eastbound Haley, there's the eastbound Haley bike lane that continues east towards Aliso Street. We are looking if there's ways to change the configuration of that corner just to make it a little bit safer, how the heavy right turn movement to go south on Milpas kind of interacts with that through bike movement as well. So plus the lighting will also make it safer for nighttime traffic as well. So all really good safety improvements, and I'm looking forward to all the safety improvements on Milpas and just reducing the amount of collisions that are happening.
Thanks. The next question is just a general what is a tree well? A tree well, they can look differently depending upon where you're at in the right of way, but it's basically where the trees, a concrete section cut out to put a tree in. Sometimes you'll see like a grate around the tree. With the ficus trees, the trunks are way too big to put any sort of grates around, but it's basically trees within the sidewalk. The next question is, if you can, let's see, go to Milpas and Yananali intersection, Michelle. And the question is, can Milpas and Yananali be restudied for a possible signal light instead of a mass arm flashing beacon light?
Yes, definitely. We can relook at that. It's unlikely that traffic conditions have changed. I know the number of collisions has not really changed over the years. The vehicle collisions, the pedestrian collisions have gone down. So it's unlikely to qualify, but we're happy to study it again. It's not a hard thing to do.
Great. This is it's not to this project, but I guess getting more a question on signal warrants, etc. That the same person asking about the question for Milpas and Yananali noticed that there's a signal light at Sola and Chapala and along Sola and Anacapa, but it was a person again relating to traffic lights or amount of vehicles on a roadway. That one does have a different purpose if you want to go into that, Derek.
Yeah, there are new traffic signals, Chapala Sola, Anacapa Sola within the last few weeks, and there are going to be new signals turned on at De La Vina and Santa Barbara streets. Yeah, the purpose of that project is to provide a safe east-west route across downtown. One of the things we look at when we do a traffic signal study, it's basically asking the question, what is the most appropriate form of traffic control for an intersection? It's not necessarily trying to justify a traffic signal or trying to justify some other device. It's what's the best thing for traffic and safety at that intersection. So we kind of throw everything under an umbrella of, you know, what's the best thing for traffic operations. And so that's kind of this combination of safety and efficiency, and just what is the best fit. So, you know, obviously pedestrian safety ranks very high. Safety for all ranks very high. You know, how to achieve that, but how to maintain an efficient corridor as well, because this is an important corridor in the city for commerce, for transit. So it's taking all of those things into consideration.
Great, thank you, Derek. Let's go to the intersection of Haley and Milpas. Michelle. And this is a comment that says the left turn restrictions on Haley and Milpas is not often observed. Will that restriction be enhanced?
There's not much more we can do to enhance it other than appropriate signs. That's getting into enforcement of traffic laws and just making sure there's adherence to traffic laws. So that's getting into the enforcement end of things. And I think it would be most appropriate to have somebody from the police department address that question.
Okay. So this comment is great to hear of adding buffers to the bike lanes from Cannon Perdido to Coda. Are any travel lane width modifications necessary for that? Or is there enough space already without the need for travel lane modifications? Why don't you go ahead, Michelle, and go to, I guess we could go to Cannon Perdido and Milpas. As for one of the cross sections.
Yeah, the right now the center turn lane on Milpas Street is quite wide. And so in order to get enough room for a 2 or 3 foot buffer, we would likely steal a few feet from that center turn lane.
Okay, it looks like we've answered all of the questions. We'll hang out just for a few minutes. Oh, looks like we got one more. And let's see. Regarding the bike lanes, will there be a bike lane on Haley or Ortega to complement that existing on Coda? So I think, Derek, you had a similar response earlier to that, but let's go ahead and reiterate that on what we heard from the community in earlier workshops related to this project and the Milpas corridor.
Yeah, as far as bike lanes on Milpas, what we heard from the community a few years ago is Coda is the right place to begin and end the bike lane. The context of the question a few years ago was, you know, we were curious if the community wanted to explore extending the bike lane down to Haley Street so that it would tie in with the existing bike lane on Haley Street that goes from downtown over to Aliso Street. But again, we heard that Coda was the sweet spot. Happy to revisit that if there's interest from the community in that, but that's just what we heard a few years ago. As far as the Coda Street bike lane and east-west routes, we recently did put in a bike lane on Ortega Street from Chapala Street over to about Ortega Park. And obviously Ortega does not continue all the way to Milpas Street because it runs into the junior high property. But that is in place on Ortega Street, and there is the existing bike lane on Haley Street from Chapala over to Alisos. And there are plans to again study that west corner of Haley and Milpa Street, just to see if we can improve the interaction between that heavy right turn movement and bike movements that might be heading over towards Aliso Street.
It's just a remark from that. She said, thank you and great job.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. Well, this is great. We had a lot of great questions tonight. We really appreciate it. For those on the webinar tonight, yeah, please tell your neighbors to come out. We will have another in-person meeting. It's basically going over the same content that we covered tonight. And we'll be at the Franklin Neighborhood Center on October 18th, I believe, Michelle, October 18th from 5:30 to 7. So, and if you want an encore, please join us for that meeting. Yeah, really appreciate your time tonight. And Michelle, if you can go to the last slide one more time. I know that when I receive these types of presentations, all the questions that I have usually pop into my head later on. So we want to make sure that we that just take note of where we will be responding to questions through the project email. So I believe it's just milpas@santabarbaraca.gov. And as far, again, as future meetings, once we have the consultant on board, which I believe the contract will be going to City Council in November, and then the technical experts will do their review, and then that's when we anticipate to have another touch point again with the community. So thank you again. And Michelle, you can go ahead and end the webinar. Have a good night, everyone.